Welcome, everyone. We are so glad you are here with us today. Thank you for all you early birds who got in right on time or even early. The topic of our talk today is the convergence of data management and data governance. And we think this is really important because these two worlds, which have always been very related, are really starting to come together in solutions that you can buy to make your data and governance lives a lot easier. So we're going to dive into that in detail. I'm going to give you some context, some overview of the market trends. Then our good folks at Informatica are going to drill down into their perception of how the market is converging as well as give you a demo of how they're actually delivering products to the marketplace. So very exciting. So just a little housekeeping here. If you've used Zoom before, you know, use the Q&A window to submit questions. We'll take them periodically throughout the event, as well as definitely at the end. Use the chat window if you're having some technical difficulty and want to talk to our administrator, Sarah. And finally, if you registered for the event, we will send you the slide deck and a recording. So we're very happy to have with us myself as one of the speakers, president of Eckerson Group, 30 years doing data analytics in all sorts of ways, research, consulting, speaking, writing books and articles and reports, all that good stuff. We have Chris Phillips, who's VP of Product Development at Informatica, and he works with customers daily to identify and design best-of-breed data governance and quality products, of which you'll get a sample today. And then also Ian Stahl, Director of Product Management at Informatica, who defines product strategy and roadmap for data intelligence and data sharing use cases and product lines, as well as the recently announced cloud data marketplace, which I'm sure he'll talk to you about. And this is me, a little bit more on me, and Eckerson Group. Some of you probably know our research from reading our reports and listening to webinars like this, but we also have a consulting arm that's very active, as well as an advisory service that does consulting for software vendors, as opposed to consulting for folks like you in the audience, user practitioners at enterprise organizations. This is what we do on the consulting side. You can see our key areas, a lot of data strategy, modern data architecture, data governance. Those are probably the three most popular services we offer today, as well as self-service, data literacy, data ops, data science, and organizational design and operating models. And we're a bunch of white-haired guys. We counted up the other day how many years we've been doing data and analytics, and it was almost 200. So a lot of expertise in our core group, and we have other folks as well. And these are just some of the organizations with which we have consulted with the last several years. All right, so before we talk about convergence, we need to talk about what data governance and data management mean. We kind of see data governance as this overlay on top of all the things you do to manage data in any shape or form. So data governance is the act of overseeing how data is managed and used to reduce risks and optimize business outcomes, whereas data management is the act of managing data, hands-on with the data through its life cycle from creation to deletion, aligning with the policies and standards that kind of trickle down from the data governance program. And you can see here, there's just many different types of data management activities involved. This is not even all of them. I would have to say that most companies start their data governance journey to focus on data quality and improve that, obviously a big pain point. Many also quickly get into or even start with privacy and security, which it's not even listed here. Data access management also tends to be one of the first things that people want to try to govern from a data management perspective. But you can see there's many other things, from data operations, document and content management even, data lifecycle, we're going around the left of this circle here, master data and reference data, reporting and analytics, that's a big one as well, and even data architecture and design. In our consulting journeys, we've seen a lot of companies who start out with a nice data architecture and data model, and then it kind of gets out of whack because of lack of oversight or business exigencies trump architecture, which in many cases is okay for the short run, but in the long term, it makes a mess. And then finally, metadata management which we're getting our arms around initially with data catalogs, but even metadata is bigger than your enterprise catalog. So there's a lot to govern, and we're starting to see these converge in commercial solutions. But before we get to that, for those of you who aren't familiar with data governance and how to do it, this is kind of an overview of some of the component parts of a data governance program, starting with vision, strategy, and the all-important mandate that gives the data program some teeth, some enforcement powers, roles, all important, teaching people on the business side the importance of owning data and its quality. There's a lot of committees and groups that are required to manage different elements of your data management environment, a lot of processes to do things like standardize terms and definitions and curate data sets. And then the data policies that define exactly how you're going to manage, including the standards for how things should look and rules. And then finally, monitoring, which means we're going to report on our progress as a data governance program. And all this revolves around your charter, you know, the mission, vision, values, and the goals and objectives of your program. So that's a high-level view of what you get into in data governance. Now, that's a lot, and all those data management tasks are a lot, too much to do in one fell swoop. You will fail if you try to do all of it and boil the ocean. So we recommend picking one of those data management domains and maybe even a slice of your organization and working on governance for that as a test case and to learn things and prove it out. It's really important to have lightweight governance because as soon as things start feeling heavy and people are attending too many committee meetings, they lose interest very quickly, which is why we recommend lightweight data governance. And one way to do that is what we call governance by design, where you inject essentially governance steps into a project plan, especially for a larger initiative like Customer 360 or a new ERP, whatever you're doing that involves data in some fashion, that you get upfront and inject governance into the process. So you can see here, there's a process going with these blue arrows. There's data management tasks that are involved in these steps and governance outcomes at the top. So the point of this is that if you get upfront and build it into a process, it becomes part of the culture and the way the company does its work, right? And that's what you want. You want governance to become part of the culture and the way things are done. Now, people often ask where to start. We often say it makes sense to piggyback your data governance program on some strategic initiative, which is really important, either an offensive or defensive initiative. But even before that, it's important to find an executive who's committed to data and is willing to sponsor the data governance. And more than that, recruit and evangelize other peers on the executive team to the importance of investing in data governance and participating in it as well. So while you're working strategically, it also is important to build up grassroots support for your data governance program. As I said, focus on one dimension of data governance and one dimension of data management. It's also really great to find a doer in the business. And usually there's at least one person who is pretty passionate about doing something like fixing the quality of data in their area. And you can build a program around that person and give them the resources and support they need across different functional areas to take their energy and their enthusiasm and hopefully some corporate support and resources to build on that and make some good things happen. So we did a whole event in April on data governance, and I encourage you to come to our website to listen to our two data governance consultants, Sean Hewitt and Josh Reed, talk all about and dive deeply into best practices and tips and tricks for succeeding with data governance. That was part of our CDO Tech event on data governance platforms in April. As part of that event, we focused on technology to support data governance. And those two consultants, Josh and Sean, and I worked quite a while to come up with this framework for understanding the technology that could or should underpin a data governance initiative. So everything in blue is really dedicated to data governance, technology anyway, to support data governance. Everything in orange are those data management tasks that we went over earlier. And you can see here from the arrows between the two that, you know, data governance flows down in the form of rules and standards and policies and even tags. And what flows up from the activity of managing data are metadata and things like that that get put into the data governance tools so that it makes it easier to manage and adjust. So at the top of the governance stack, you see a portal. That's really one place to go for anyone in the organization to find anything related to data governance, whether it's announcements, content links, links to training modules, organization charts, RACI assignments. And also there's a universal search there to search everything about data governance in the organization. There might also be a search in your data catalog, which is at the next level down. So this search probably is your catalog of catalogs, because most organizations, unfortunately, are having more than one catalog instituted. So below the search, you see the data catalog, the business glossary. Those are kind of the heart and soul of a data governance program, as well as the policies that are defined. And you may have links to those because they may be in different parts of the organization, such as the security team may have its own policies that apply to data. Risk management, that's where we manage issues regarding data quality, data access, security, privacy. Any issues that arise need to be dealt with. So that's kind of an application that does that. And then there's the reporting on the governance processes itself, the KPIs that we've established as success metrics, various trends, et cetera. And below that is data governance operations and workflows. So that's really where the engine that helps us perform the work of data governance, whether it's voting on definitions, whether it's escalating issues and remediating issues, all that's built into a workflow engine that runs your data governance platform. Now, to be honest, most companies have done this in Excel or SharePoint, and it's moderately, minimally effective. But we're fortunate today that vendors have realized that there's a big need out there, and they can really help optimize these programs to do more with less people if they provide a full-fledged data governance platform in which to do this work and help people collaborate. That was the box on the right, and integrate with data management activities. And as you can imagine, wouldn't it even be great if all those things, both the data governance and the data management activities, were actually being executed and managed and handled on the same platform, so there was no reason things weren't integrated and metadata wasn't being exchanged and policies and rules weren't being applied at the appropriate place. So that's why we're talking today about the convergence of data governance and data management, because we think there's huge opportunities there to make everything that you do much easier. Yeah, there's the convergence. Okay. One of the things we did as part of that event in April is we helped you figure out how to evaluate data governance products, tools, and solutions. So we created this spreadsheet, which you can download from our site, our website, Eckerson.com. It's a spreadsheet you can highly tailor to your own requirements and needs, and it helps you score different solutions side by side, give you a quantitative perspective if you're doing a product selection exercise. The evaluation criteria on the left, the first 11 came right from the image on the prior slide, and the last 4 we threw in because we think they're important. So how quickly can you get up to speed and deliver value with this solution? How integrated is it with other solutions that you have, data management solutions, data governance solutions, other catalogs? How viable is the vendor? How mature is it? How long has it been in the marketplace? What's its reputation? And then finally, what does it cost? Both upfront costs and ongoing costs. Those are all things that you should look at, in our opinion, but you can obviously add other things and delete these certain things if you want, or modify them to suit your need, to give you an objective perspective of the marketplace. Finally, we did try to position products in a framework, and we came up with this quadrant chart. Our goal here is not to do what Gartner and all the other research firms do and pick winners and losers, because we think that's a fruitless task and doesn't really help anyone. Our goal is really to help you create a short list of products that are apples to apples that you can use then to make up your own mind of what's best for your organization. So come up with this chart. It's not perfect, but I think it helps get us to where you want to go. So the left-hand axis is functionality, and that is either is a data management centric. In other words, is that its heritage, data management, one of those dozen or so activities we talked about right at the outset, or is it more data governance centric? Maybe it's a data catalog, for instance, or a business glossary. So, and then the x-axis is the scope. So is it a pure play data management tool, a pure play data governance tool, or is it really a much bigger suite that has embedded certain aspects of data governance and data management in it? So for the upper left-hand quadrant, we put products in there that if you already have data management tools and you just need a data governance overlay, you would pick those products that would appear in that quadrant. And we'll show you some products in a second. You would pick products in this quadrant if you need a data management platform with increasingly now integrated, as you'll see with Informatica, integrated data governance capabilities. So all in one, pure play data governance, data management solution. Or, do you already have a BI tool and you want some governance built into that tool to manage, say, the reports that tool generates? So we would say this is more lightweight data governance that's going to complement your tools on the left-hand quadrants. Or do you have a big software suite that has many different application functionalities, including data governance and data management? So that would be from cloud vendors, for instance, or database vendors. So we're not going to show you the complete list of products, but just suffice to say that there's a lot of vendors in the left two quadrants. Informatica is our sponsor for this webinar. They've been the predominant data management player in the industry for many years. They recently moved into the data governance space. So now they have an integrated data governance and data management platform that they'll show you in a second. There are pure plays in the other areas like Elation and Atlan. They are dedicated, say, data governance product, data catalogs, and then Zaloni, Talent, et cetera, on the data management side. And there are many others. Analytics side, you might have vendors like this. And on the data management side, you have your big boys and girls that have many other objectives besides data governance and data management. So if you want to see the complete list, you can also go to the CDO TechVent site and check out the replay, or I think even download the slides. So in summary, data governance products are proliferating, which is good news. Things in blue are starting to be built out commercially, especially data catalogs and data glossaries, business glossaries. But not all data governance products that you see out there are full service platforms like we've defined in this framework that you see in the bottom. The good news, I think it's good news, data governance and data management products are converging, so you can get all in one if you need that. But ultimately, select the tools that are best suited to your requirements and culture. If you've already got a strong data management platform, but they don't really offer strong data governance, you might want to get a pure play data governance product. So with that, I'll take a question or two, and then we'll turn it over to, do you have any questions for us, for me at this point? And I'll check the questions that we have down here.
Actually, Wayne, while you're checking, I did have a question for you. So Jitesh Ghai is our chief product officer, right? He has this saying, which is data governance without data management is just documentation, and documentation is instantly obsolete the minute you write it down, which, maybe a little bit overstated, right? But it does get to a point I think you were making before, which is this sort of bilateral relationship between data governance and data management and the metadata interchange between them, right? And I guess my question was related to how leverageable is that metadata in the governance tier in terms of informing data governance practitioners about what is going on, and sort of, what kind of examples can we offer the audience about sort of how that might inform what's going on?
Yeah, well, the metadata is absolutely the key here. It really is the oil that greases the whole data management wheel here. So you can't really manage or govern your data management activities if you're not pulling in the metadata from those various data management tools. So, the thing that we're seeing a lot now is automating the indexing, the tagging and correlating of data objects as they are ingested into your environment through a data catalog. So catalog, which is a really monumental task to set up and maintain, is completely automated or mostly automated thanks to the use of AI and ML that's looking at the metadata and then documenting it so people don't have to. The catalog is self-sustaining. It's easier to use and find things and find related things. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I think we're all just starting to figure out how that really works and leverage it to the hilt. But I think, going forward, we'll start to use metadata in many other situations to facilitate data governance processes, especially collaboration among different groups that have to work together to manage data effectively.
Agreed.
All right. I think at this point, maybe we should turn it over to you guys so people can actually get a good look at what's possible in the real world.
Sure. All right. So thanks for that intro, Wayne. I think, as you mentioned in this session, I'll be talking a bit more about data governance, data management, and what this kind of emerging piece that organizations are talking about, which is data intelligence, right? And how they enable you to become more data-driven, how all these things interact with each other. As I said, I'm Chris, so I run the product management team for governance, quality, privacy, and Ian will be talking in a few minutes. But let me maybe get started and set the scene a bit. So if we look at what's happening in organizations today, there's this desire to be a data-driven organization. And, if we look at what that takes, we need to be able to combine, process accurate data and use our experience combined with that to have data-driven outcomes and decisions. However, if we look at what the feedback from the practitioners, only 30% are saying that, they're taking decisions based on or driven by data analysis. So what does that mean about the rest, right? Are we still driving too many of these decisions, not on the data, but kind of on our gut or experience? And, people ask, why is that? We've given them BI tools, we've, set up maybe some light governance processes with owners and stewards. We've got spreadsheets to a point where, SharePoints where we're tracking some of this metadata, but, it's not, doesn't seem to get better. And one of the challenges that the organization find is to be data driven, I need access to data, and I need the ability to deliver that data to the person, the consumer that requires the data. And that consumer could be anyone in the organization. It's not necessarily a kind of data management or data governance professional, right? Could be a line of business user who's trying to identify more things. And some of those abilities to get the right data, find the right data, and get the data is getting more complex due to data fragmentation and others. So we need to empower users to be able to find, understand, trust, and access the data that they need, and to do that in a timely fashion. So we need this kind of trustworthy data access to make planning decisions, predictions, build new AI models that potentially generate even more data, etc. So when we look at this kind of data sharing principle, one of the most important pieces of it is trust. And trust has many different angles to it. It's not just data quality, but it's also who else is using the data, and is it the right data to use for the right use case, etc. But trust in general helps us use the data better, provision it, increases the confidence in the people that are the end consumers of that data. And when we were setting this up, I think we we got to this point where we said, hey, actually, yeah, to get intelligence derived from data and get data intelligence, if you have trusted data that can be easily shared, that's certainly a problem that is more easily solved than otherwise. So what are some of the challenges that we see in organizations that we work with that are coming up? So it starts with slow data supply chains. Finding and getting access to the right data remains cumbersome in a lot of organizations, and consumers or people who need the data spend more time looking for data and requesting data and getting access to data than they do actually working with it. And then of course there's, is this the right data? Can I trust this data? Is it up to date? Does it have the right quality considerations for the use case that I'm working at? Who can I ask some questions on this? If I've got everything sitting in spreadsheets, there's rigid documentation kind of there, a bit like this, the phrase that Ian was referring to that Jitesh uses. It's instantly obsolete. It doesn't scale. And then there's obviously risks associated with data. Am I using the right data? We know consumers still don't have full confidence. Well, only if 33% of consumers believe that their data is being used responsibly. So am I using it? Am I allowed to use this data for this purpose? And am I in the right policy construct, etc.? So some of the big things that we see coming up again and again, but there's more to it than that even. We need to be able to tie finding data and the context and the information about data that we need back to the data delivery, right? It's not a disconnected thing, and that's where some of this overlap of governance and data management comes into play. We've got the metadata, to Wayne's point earlier. Metadata kind of greases the whole thing. We've got the metadata to be able to automate the delivery of the data back out to the consumer. So now we can, as part of that, make better predictions on, hey, people typically use this data, also use this other data, or have you considered a new data set that's been coming out? And so we empower users and get to that data-driven business outcome. To get this kind of exponential, what we call the exponential value from the data, there's a number of things needed, and data intelligence needs to deliver in a number of ways. We talk about this in the terms of predictive data intelligence, and that means we can unlock the value of data by kind of combining some of the human elements as well as the AI, ML elements that we use to both provide the data, but also pull some of the metadata pieces together between business and technical, for example. And it's not just manual workflows. That metadata is connected with the data management pieces. So we get in context trust, not just populated scores. So let's have a look at what this looks like maybe when we talk about predictive data intelligence, what do we mean? And it kind of looks at it in a slightly reverse way to the way you might have seen it in other places, because it all starts with data consumers. To become a data-driven organization, as we said at the beginning, right, we need consumers to be able to find and browse and request access to data with the right information and understanding. So having some of that governance and catalog and business context, policy, etc. information behind it. And we need to be able to tie that all together for them so that from the marketplace, I can start requesting data. And what our platform allows you to do is start automating that data delivery back to the consumer. And what's more, as we look at all these data consumption pieces happening, we can learn ever more about what is the type of data that is popular, who's using what data, and drive that, learn from those patterns and drive ever more and better predictions and recommendations and automations. And those automations are driven by what we at Informatica refer to as Claire. And Claire is really just the kind of name that we use for our AI-powered metadata intelligence and automation that drives a lot of these things. And Claire is already trained in a number of different things like data classifications and labeling and curations. And we train it on a large amount of metadata and continuously, as I mentioned, train it on patterns that we see. So you get value straight away from some of the capabilities that are there, from intelligent glossary associations to link business and technical information, automations for DQ assessments, and many more, as well as getting ever better, ever more refined pieces when you start consuming the platform. And this kind of intelligence layer, if you like, or Claire layer, sits squarely in the middle of what we call the Intelligent Data Management Cloud. And the Intelligent Data Management Cloud really is governance and data management and more coming together. So it's one platform, it's one product that we offer, which has a number of different capabilities that you can see here, from cataloging and quality and governance and marketplace, but also data integration, which becomes useful for the data delivery, which we also use as an input in catalogs, for example, for lineage, etc. So this data management cloud, which can run on a number of different ecosystems, can have some of the execution based on premises or in your private clouds, allows you to pull everything together, and is offered kind of on a consumption model. So it's not, oh, well, do I buy catalog or quality? It's everything in one. Now, before I hand over to Ian for a demonstration of how this all hangs together, I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes covering some of the high-level pieces that are particularly important to the areas of data consumptions and data-driven pieces that I was talking about. So first off is the cloud data marketplace, and that's really the one-stop shop for all data consumers, all data requirements, where they can come and browse and find and order and request data independent of where the data is stored. So it's not just a view on here's the Informatica data or here's the Snowflake data. It's whatever type it might be. It includes the context, the quality indicators, and is enriched, as we were saying earlier, by the additional information we can glean from governance and catalogs. So be that lineage information, glossary information, policy frameworks, etc. That provide that extra context, and of course having a view on quality. What's the quality of the data? Being able to automate the measurement of that quality as we go through the different phases of a lineage, for example, but then also being able to use the quality capabilities to start remediating some of the issues that might be found in the data. So with that, let me hand over to Ian to run you a demonstration of how this all hangs together.
Sure,
over to you,
Chris. Ian. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for that overview. So if everyone can see my screen, I thought I'd just go ahead and give you guys a quick illustration of how predictive data intelligence works on the Informatica cloud. I thought what I'd do is I'd illustrate how we use Informatica's Intelligent Data Management Cloud to facilitate frictionless access to relevant high-value data for data consumers distributed throughout the enterprise. To do that, I'd start here with the data marketplace. Data marketplace is a service on the Informatica cloud, and it provides a simple Amazon-like shopping experience that anyone can use to find data they need for their analytics, their data science, their data visualization project. And they can do this regardless of their current level of technical skill or data literacy. Marketplace allows you to simply browse relevant categories to see what data assets on offer. You click into one of these categories like this sales category, and Marketplace keeps you appraised of the recently created and updated collections of data that might be of interest to you in this topic area. Like this same-store sales location data here, you click into it and it gives you visibility into what this data is about. In fact, Marketplace provides data consumers with everything they need to know to make an informed decision about the relevance of this data to their needs. They can see, for example, what is it about? What is it for? Who owns it? Who's responsible for delivering it to them? They can see what is in it, which data sets, which key fields are in this data package that I may need to be able to correlate with my analytics or machine learning model. And I can see how this data is available to me, where I can get it. And data providers can deploy this data to multiple access points that may be suitable for different data consumers' needs, analytics environments, machine learning and runtimes, things like that. And speaking of those consumers, I can get visibility into the consumers that are using this data. I know that this data is being sourced and used by other people, and I can see that developing community of practice around that data. This often actually determines for a given data consumer, a given analyst, whether they'll choose to use this data, that other people in their community that they know are also using this data. Again, getting back to that collaboration point that Wayne was making earlier. If I like what I see, I just press a button and I can check it out. I provide details on how I intend to use this data, and I can select where I want to get this data delivered into my productivity environment. In this case, for example, I may need this data delivered to this S3 environment. Go ahead and accept the terms and conditions of use and hit submit. Behind the scenes, Marketplace uses Informatica Cloud to orchestrate the activity needed to be able to get this data to me quickly. And I can track that activity right here on my Marketplace homepage. Meanwhile, on the data owner side, the data owner uses Marketplace to receive notifications about the demand for his data. You can see, for example, the request that the consumer just made, including all of the information that the consumer supplied about what data they need, how they want to be able to get it, and where. If I click in here, I get visibility into exactly the physical location where this data needs to be provided. The thing that provides that location, the service on the Informatica Cloud, is Data Governance Catalog, which scans and inventories data throughout the estate to give everyone a complete picture of all of the data that's out there. This is really good because that metadata layer, again, like Chris was saying, is what greases the wheel, if you will, to be able to make that data available. At a glance, I can easily see, what's in, what this field content is, and what the data quality reporting is against it. And with the relationships that we aggregate around this data, I can see, for example, the policies that control the terms of use for this data. So when I'm provisioning this data downstream to a consumer, I can account for those policies and how I'm provisioning it. Speaking of provisioning, I can do that provisioning here in the Informatica Cloud as well, using Cloud Data Integration. Cloud Data Integration sources that metadata from the catalog and incorporates that into Data Integration Cloud mappings. Claire is also informed, our AI layer is also informed about that metadata and can use it to provide recommendations on how this mapping should be produced, giving visibility into next best transforms that you might use to be able to provision this data to the endpoint where it's requested. Even, for example, including the connection that you would need to be able to provide this data into the S3 environment where it was requested. If I'm satisfied with this mapping, I just go ahead and click run, and it goes ahead and executes on my behalf. And I can maintain and update the data governance, the metadata record about the movement of this data. See, Catalog automatically generates a lineage graph that stays up to date with the flow of data as it moves through the Informatica Cloud to the endpoint that was requested. So I can see exactly how that data gets reliably to the endpoint where the data consumer requested it. Now all I need to do is just let the consumer know that the data is available where and when they wanted it. I go back to Marketplace here, and I can go ahead and check the notification that I was looking at earlier, provide that update on the fulfillment of that data. I indicate where we provide that data to into that S3 environment that they requested, add my comments, and hit fulfill. Marketplace automatically notifies the consumer about the availability of the data so they can start using it, start being productive in their analytics and data science tasks that they need in that productivity environment where we made that data available. Again, closing that last mile gap that we had for that data. One more point I was going to make about this before I hand it back over to Chris. With the capabilities of Informatica Intelligent Data Management Cloud, we've begun automating much of the activity associated with the delivery of this data. So for example, in the scenario where the approver approves the request to be able to get access to that data in the marketplace, we can automatically stand up mappings that execute inside the cloud layer to be able to provision that data to the endpoint requested, leveraging the metadata that we've acquired from Cloud Data Catalog and orchestrating the movement of that data both inside Informatica Cloud as well as inside of other platforms using the orchestration layer in Cloud Application Integration. This allows us to automate a lot of the processes for making that data available in the analytics and reporting environments, in data science and machine learning runtimes, or in external data sharing environments where it can be accessible to your partners, suppliers, or other people in your ecosystem. This allows you to drive down the cost of data engineering while simultaneously scaling your data operations so that you can meet the real demand that's out there in your enterprise for that relevant data. That's the value of being predictive. And Chris, I was going to hand back over to you to talk a little bit about that, the value of being predictive with predictive data intelligence. Chris?
Sure. Thanks, Ian. Thanks. Great demo. I think as we were saying earlier, I hope this helps you kind of realize how data management, data governance are coming together and driving analytics and business outcomes, right? So this allows you to realize that value a lot quicker. As we said earlier, trust is one of the things that helps pull all of this stuff together. And as I mentioned, trust is multifaceted. It's not just data quality statistics, as Ian was showing. It's also trust that I'm using the right piece of data based on softer metrics like, hey, Ian's using it, so maybe that's the one that I should be using. And we offer all of these capabilities, as I mentioned, on a single platform that we refer to as Data Management Cloud, based on a simple consumption pricing model. With that, I think, let's see if there's any questions, comments out there.
Oh, I got a few questions. Yeah, sure. We actually got a lot of good questions, but I'm going to hog the spotlight since it's our webinar.
All right.
So I'm going to ask you two basic questions, which I should know the answers to, but I actually don't. What is the difference between the Informatica data marketplace and the Informatica data catalog? Because in many ways, they support some of the same functions.
That's a great question, Wayne. And I guess I would take that by saying that it really comes down to who the data consumer is. I think for us, as Chris mentioned, the linchpin of predictive data intelligence, being more predictive, is being consumption first and being able to be present when the consumer needs to access that data. Now, one thing we know about data consumers, particularly in large enterprise organizations that we tend to support with our solution offerings, is that data consumers can have a wide degree and widely variable skill sets, capabilities, and data literacy within their organization. So in order to be able to meet that consumer where they are, we field a marketplace, which, as I mentioned, provides that sort of simple, easily accessible user experience to be able to shop for data, if you will, using that shop metaphor, right? And that marketplace is populated by metadata that we get from Data Catalog, which inventories all of the data throughout the enterprise based upon our scanning and acquisition of that metadata at scale. So I'd say those are the primary differences between the two, but I would point out something else about this, that these are not just discrete tools that are kind of intended to be used independently, right? When they support each other in the sense that the data catalog provides essentially the back-end inventory or base of available data that you might want to be able to curate to make available to those distributed data consumers, those analytics and users sprinkled throughout your enterprise. Right. So, conversely, the marketplace, right, provides that sort of closes that loop by providing a way to understand the demand for data throughout the enterprise. Yeah, go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, the marketplace you showed looks really good, very, very easy, very intuitive. So it sounds like the catalog contains a superset of all your metadata, maybe geared to a slightly more technical audience, whereas the marketplace is geared to everyone, and certainly, it's a business-friendly interface to your data. Is that accurate?
I would say so. I guess the comment I would add to that is that the catalog is also increasingly being used to provide state information to execution. inside of the data management cloud. So for example, I alluded to earlier in the demonstration that we leverage the metadata coming from the catalog, metadata scanning, right, from the source, to be able to inform kind of how mappings should be stood up so that data is provisioned. And increasingly, like I mentioned, we're starting to automate a lot of that activity. That automation is a function of standardization that we can do inside of the environment, but also pattern-based learning that we're getting from other data integration mappings that we're executing at scale on the cloud.
Okay. So here's a stupid question. And my last, and we'll go to the.
There's no stupid questions, right?
Yeah. So, I'm an oldster here. I've been doing, I started doing this when data warehouses began. And the point there was that everyone, if you had strong role-based access control, everyone gets access to only the data that they need to access in whatever repository you have. So why do you want to go through a provisioning mechanism, basically buying and provisioning data when you could just apply role-based access to the data itself and give people an easy-to-use query tool to go after it?
That's a good question. And I guess I would answer that by saying that, first of all, I'd say that one thing you might recall from those days of the enterprise data warehouse, right, was that the data warehouse is a managed platform, right, for the availability of the enterprise data. And it does a lot of things underneath it. For example, not just acquisition of data and processing of data, but conversion of that data into things like dimensional data marts and things like that can be queried effectively, right? So there's a lot going on in the data warehouse layer. Right. But because of that, access to that data warehouse layer is controlled, right? So you might recall that a lot of organizations stood up an enterprise architecture practice specifically for the purpose of acting as gatekeepers for the access to that data. I think the thing that we've seen that's changed a lot in the market, and the thing that's driving a lot of this sort of predictive data intelligence and data sharing outcomes, is a proliferation or consumerization of analytics practices and analytics tools throughout the organization, driving the need for data to be delivered to endpoints that are accessible to that consumer.
Yeah. Well, I also think that if you got that very nice marketplace interface, you want to continue that interface with a shopping and provisioning mechanism. So I think it makes a lot of sense, because just providing access to a data warehouse or even just, even inside a BI tool with a hierarchy of folders and files is not as intuitive for sure. And it's probably more geared to a power user rather than the type of users that you're talking about. And plus, in our consulting engagement, I think one of the big pain points that we see in almost every company is there's a big data bottleneck,
Sure.
Absolutely. Lots of people
we see that
requesting data sets from either the BI, well, it's usually some kind of data engineering team, whatever its name is. And they just
sometimes, it can have a fancy label. Like I think one that I heard was data concierge service. Have you ever heard of that? So people have operate a data concierge service, and you feel like you're really getting white glove treatment there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
so
it can take 6 weeks to get your data issue addressed that way. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's one way to tackle that bottleneck. So,
and I think one thing we found is that organizations often find that when they stand up a kind of service bureau model like that, right, it does meet a lot of the requirements of their consumers, but they can't scale, right? They just don't have enough domain expertise. There's not enough data engineering functions within the organization to be able to meet the demand that's out there. And then without that, then the people revert back to form, right? They go back to, they're going to find the data based upon who they can tag locally, or maybe that data is, isn't consistent with the organization's policies, right? So it's a double-edged sword. And I think often that's where we encounter customers that are interested in using Marketplace, is when they've gone through that experience and figured out, hey, I need a way to get people off of my service bureau and onto sort of like a self-serve model.
Yeah, although it still requires some engineering, as you showed, to actually deliver that product to them, right?
That is true. And that is why we're working so feverishly to be able to automate as much of that data engineering activity as possible. A lot of it would actually.
Once you build one pipeline to deliver a product, you've got that. So you could turn that into a product. I didn't see that in the tool where, maybe I missed it, where you can search on existing data sets that have already been fulfilled. I assume you have that, right?
Yeah, I think one area that is relatively new, we didn't really cover the search topic there in the demonstration earlier, is we have the ability to search based upon the delivery target. So for example, I mentioned that the data set that we were, that the consumer was evaluating, they needed it delivered to S3. So once I provision that to S3, it's available at that endpoint or in the, in the bucket where they can get access to it. Once that's available, then other consumers can get access to that same endpoint, and that's a searchable parameter. So if you just want to be able to find data that's sitting in the S3 endpoint, you can filter the available data in the marketplace on that basis.
Yeah. Okay, let's take some questions from some of the attendees here. Lots of questions. I think there's some confusion about your marketplace versus, say, a Snowflake marketplace. So
sure.
Venkat asked, well, how do you get people to come to your marketplace versus the Snowflake marketplace, which is an entirely different beast?
That's a great question. And Venkat, I was just going to comment, you've offered some really great questions and really insightful questions through this entire webinar. So I really appreciate your engagement on this topic. I know it's an exciting topic for a lot of people that we work with. One thing I would say about that is that the way we think of it is Snowflake's marketplace, right? If you look at how it works, is a facility that allows Snowflake's customers to be able to interchange data between each other, right? So if you have a Snowflake account and you're standing up a data mart, you want to make that data available to some other, customer, some other Snowflake user, you can use the marketplace to be able to broker the exchange of that data. Informatica's marketplace is actually your marketplace, which is to say it's the marketplace that you stand up to serve your end customers. And those end data consumers could be inside your organization or they could be outside your organization. But from our standpoint, we view that our marketplace is a service that you deploy inside of your environment to lower the friction associated with being able to get access to data. And that's why, for example, we didn't illustrate this either, but Marketplace has facilities in it. For example, you can rebrand it. You can change the look and feel. You can provide some sort of customization around the styling of it so that it can be consistent with your brand and consistent with the relationship that you have with your end customers. It's because it's oriented to be able to provide that last mile. So I would say that's probably the way we would describe the difference between Snowflake and Informatica's marketplace.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Jiahao raised the issue of the data mesh. She asked whether we'll see data governance become decentralized model for data management. And I said in the response, I said, absolutely not. Data mesh can't work without a centralized data governance facility. It also needs centralized data platform too. But I was wondering as I was watching your demo, I thought, oh, this marketplace of yours would be awesome for a data mesh environment, right?
Yeah, we feel the same way.
Yeah,
absolutely.
In fact, you couldn't probably do a data mesh without this. And I see a data mesh. I have a lot of problems with the whole data mesh thing, but we've done consulting for some organizations that are they've got institutionalized silos. Especially true in universities or hospitals with an academic bent to them, where they have these little fiefdoms, and they're also data fiefdoms, and there is much more formal data sharing across the units,
right? Just
because of the culture of the institution, and that's where I think a data mesh is going to be important. If you can.
I agree. Yeah, I think I agree with you, Wayne. And I guess the point I would say is that where we see the data mesh pattern, right, of data interchange really becoming really sort of unique, right, and sort of really the optimal solution is when the organization's data economy exceeds their institutional or organizational boundaries. And this is something that we've seen increasingly prevalent in when organizations are looking to deploy Marketplace as a service on the cloud, that they don't necessarily distinguish internal from external data consumers. But to be able to facilitate, data exchange of data or provisioning of data downstream to suppliers or to partners or other people in their ecosystem, one of the things that's very critical about that is that they need to be able to standardize the terms and conditions by which that data is distributed, by which it's accessed and used by those third parties. This is, I think, a pattern that we're increasingly seeing like as a kind of a data contract or smart data contract, right? Which incorporates policies and rule frameworks to be able to make that data available to the consumers. And I would say that a data mesh, in order for it to be successful, I think needs to incorporate some notion of a policy framework that can be distributed.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was great. I think we tackled a lot of interesting topics about what a converged environment could look like. And we got a lot of good questions, not all of which we answered, but we will do so after this. And if you have any other questions, please forward them to myself or Chris or Ian at Informatica. We'd love to help you. So with that, thank you all for attending and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, everyone.